Yikes. I really need to start working on some actual content for this channel of mine, don't I? Well, fortunately, I've got just the solution. A new video game series has seized my attention as of late. Well, new to me at least. It's a full decade older than I am. Show of hands. How many of you knew much of anything about Dragon Quest before it got into Smash Brothers? Well, if you're not from a certain Eastern island nation, there's a fair chance that your knowledge of it ranged from vague to non-existent. Put briefly, Dragon Quest basically invented an entire video game genre, and yet, despite achieving rampant success in Japan, it never got nearly as much attention in the West. It didn't get my attention, that's for sure. I heard the name thrown around a few times, and had a vague impression that it was rather important in the creation of the role-playing game genre, but my closest thing to actual interaction with the games consisted of me playing a demo of Dragon Quest Builders, and also knowing that it crossed over with Mario in a Monopoly game for some reason. The only Dragon Quest game to actually hold my attention somewhat was Dragon Quest XI, after it showed up in a Nintendo Direct. So, what changed exactly? What made me finally take notice of this series? Obviously, Smash Brothers was what made me give it a second glance, but my initial reaction to the hero reveal trailer was pretty lukewarm, with every ounce of my excitement being immediately diverted to a certain barren bird getting a Smash invite. So while Smash Brothers was undoubtedly what brought Dragon Quest to my attention, it was the actual contents of this series that held onto it. No joke here, once I realized exactly what Dragon Quest was about, in less than a week's time it went from a series I couldn't care less about to... And so, while I anxiously await the Switch release of Dragon Quest XI, it's time for me to talk about how exactly Dragon Quest grabbed my hype, free time, YouTube schedule, and bank account. Starting with the trait that first seized my attention, the art style. I like Dragon Ball. Didn't grow up with it, but DBZ Abridged did manage to suck me into it some years back. Why do I bring this up? Well, I'd like to draw attention to the series' creator for a second. I could probably fill several pages of this script with Akira Toriyama's accolades and accomplishments, ranging from him laying the groundwork for the entire manga and anime industry and still making waves to this day, to him being officially knighted a Knight of the Order of Arts and Letters by the French government. And such praise is well earned if you ask me. Toriyama's work is infused with such color, charm, and unbridled energy that it is perhaps not surprising that he has graced forms of media beyond manga and anime. Some years ago, I played the RPG classic Chrono Trigger for the first time, which has Toriyama's handiwork all over it. I had an absolute blast with the game, and upon completing it, I clearly remember wondering if Toriyama worked on any other notable video games. And had I spent 1 minute looking into it, I probably would have already been a Dragon Quest fan by the time the Smash Brothers DLC came out. I'd begun to suspect Toriyama's involvement in Dragon Quest after seeing Android 17 over here, but it wasn't until Smash garnered more of my attention that I realized that Dragon Quest is basically medieval fantasy Dragon Ball, and that Toriyama has been a key component of the series since its debut in 1986, lending his artistry to the character and enemy designs. Dragon Quest is a tour de force of his work, encapsulating both the softer, rounder style of the original Dragon Ball and the more angular, hard-edged style of Z. And honestly, this was the tipping point for me. It was what made me pay full attention to the series and seek out more information, and everything I discovered afterwards just pushed me further down this cavernous rabbit hole. Good RPGs and good music kind of go hand in hand, don't they? Not always, I'm sure, but whenever I think of my favorite RPGs, the examples that come to mind invariably have some magnificent melodies to their name. And with Dragon Quest being the RPG bedrock that it is, its musical score can certainly be credited with setting that trend. Similar to how Toriyama was already an acclaimed artist on his own standing before lending his talents to Dragon Quest, Kawachi Sugiyama was already an accomplished musician before he became the series' composer, with a comprehensive knowledge of classical music. To my knowledge, Sugiyama was the first video game composer to use a live orchestra to record his music before it was adapted into video game format. This continued throughout the series, with Dragon Quest compositions hitting the orchestra halls regularly over the years. Naturally, his music as it appeared in the older games was held back considerably by the technology of the day, but man does it make for some excellent chiptune. But even the nerd in me that has an affinity for the electric bleeps and boops of the olden days can't deny that Sugiyama's work is at its finest when backed by an actual orchestra, which means that when technology evolved to the point where symphonic scores could be used in the games themselves, oh boy. Time to talk about the gameplay. It's fairly easy to write off Dragon Quest as being too old-fashioned, and, well, they kind of are old-fashioned. The series started as a game where you and monsters take turns beating each other up as you explore a world and talk to people. And over 3 decades later, it is still a game where you and monsters take turns beating each other up as you explore a world and talk to people. Dragon Quest likes to stick to its roots, and if you don't like traditional turn-based RPG gameplay, you're probably not going to like Dragon Quest. However, I put it to you that Dragon Quest's insistence on adhering to its simplistic foundations is more a blessing than a curse. Simplicity is not a bad thing in and of itself if it's done well, and Dragon Quest does it well. To me personally, the biggest appeal of Dragon Quest's gameplay is that it strikes a perfect balance between simplicity and genuine substance. They are uncomplicated to play, but they offer a lot to do. For example, as much as I love Xenoblade games for their expansiveness and complexity, the amount of micromanagement and busy work you have to do to stay on top of its intricate battle system can get a little ridiculous. In contrast, Dragon Quest games are quite easy to get to grips with, while still offering you something to sink your teeth into. You get to savor the simple joys of exploring a colorful world and growing more powerful as a combatant without being laden with chores. And this makes them surprisingly relaxing to play. Well, okay, maybe not the really old ones. Those can be very difficult and frustrating. Furthermore, while Dragon Quest games don't stray from their foundation, they're more than happy to build on it. So far, I've played the mobile remakes of Dragon Quest 1 and 2 to completion, played the ridiculously substantial demo of Dragon Quest XI on Nintendo Switch, and played bits and pieces of games in between. So, while I'm still getting my bearings on the series at large, I know enough about them to appreciate how effectively they have grown and improved over the years. Different games are identifiable by the individual ideas that they brought to the table, such as Dragon Quest III introducing character classes, or Dragon Quest V pioneering the monster capturing and training system that would inspire Pokémon. Also, these games have a certain unshakable stability and identity to them. Dragon Quest has adhered to a consistently high level of quality throughout the decades. Some are better than others, of course, and none of them are flawless, but there's never really been an out-and-out dud, or a controversial entry in the series that radically split the opinion of fans. And the strengths of its simple traditionalism have safeguarded it from some of the issues that have plagued games that tried and failed to incorporate radically new ideas to stay relevant rather than sticking to what they do well. Sonic the Hedgehog's an easy target when talking about this sort of thing. Lastly, there is one more crucial feature of Dragon Quest that I must bring to light, an aspect of paramount importance that was instrumental in capturing my attention. These games are kinda dumb. Not every game has to be taken seriously 100% of the time to be enjoyable, and Dragon Quest isn't really trying to be. Sure, every Dragon Quest game's gonna have some sort of apocalyptic evil lurking on the horizon that the player's probably gonna have to deal with at some point, but Dragon Quest games let you have a good time on the way to doing so, and are unapologetically silly in places. A lot of RPGs really like to hammer home the tension and conflict, with stuff like Final Fantasy having a comparatively oppressive tone. I mean, it's not like Final Fantasy games are starkly humorous or anything, but for the most part, they like to be taken very seriously. Meanwhile, Dragon Quest over here is all like, nah, I'ma go and fill the enemy roster with some of the goofiest creatures imaginable. Also, as Smash Bros. Might have informed you, Dragon Quest games have really silly names for the magic spells and special attacks you use, with stuff like Kaswoosh, Zoom, Crackle Slash, and Thwack. And wouldn't you know it, I kind of like goofy, colorful, and fun-loving RPGs. They're kind of a bit like those quirky Mario RPGs that I have just now succeeded in yammering on about in every YouTube video I've made so far. Also, you know Earthbound, that weird little RPG that I've kind of styled my whole channel after? Yeah, Earthbound's a Dragon Quest parody, with many a common thread weaving between the two. Honestly, it's incredible that it took me this long to find these games. Dragon Quest stories share in this lightheartedness as well, from what I've seen of the series thus far anyway. Again, yeah, you're inevitably gonna have to go and save the world from a terrible evil of some sort that's causing a lot of people a lot of problems, but the games still don't take themselves too seriously, with most of the immediate attention steered towards your interactions with a host of colorful and charismatic characters you meet along the way. This does mean that Dragon Quest plots don't share in the intricacy and complexity that some other RPGs go for, and I completely understand if that's a turnoff for some people. However, I think that it all ties back to the whole well-done simplicity thing that Dragon Quest is so good at. It seems to me that a lot of RPGs, particularly the Japanese ones, like to go for too much complexity in the plot, and maybe have a little too much of a fondness for grandiose plot twists. The ending of Xenoblade Chronicles comes readily to mind here. Dragon Quest's simplicity makes the plots a lot more digestible, and I really don't mind the simpler structure when the characters within them are as colorful and fun to be around as some of the ones I've come across so far. Dragon Quest games are the kind of games you can relax to, sort of like the gaming equivalent of a good book you'd read while curled up in front of a crackling fireplace on a rainy day. The accessible, fun gameplay, beautiful music, and lively artwork just add to the game's comfortable, pleasant, and inviting atmosphere. At the end of the day, I play a video game to have fun, and Dragon Quest is happy to oblige with its upbeat and fantastical adventures. Most of the time. I have spoken at great length so far about how much I like my simple, colorful, and upbeat video games, but I've yet to mention my favorite condiment to this particular gaming repast, an undercurrent of tension that pays off in a big way. It can be genuinely unsettling when a typically cheerful game suddenly pulls back the curtains and reveals something much more sinister slumbering beneath. And from what I've heard, Dragon Quest is more than capable of such narrative trickery. I can't honestly talk about Dragon Quest plots with a lot of confidence at this point, since the only games I've actually completed are the first two. The series was still finding its feet with these games, and they are apparently the least interesting plot-wise. But I've heard things said by those far more well-versed than me that point directly to Dragon Quest games having a darkness and subtle complexity hidden inside them. And I have seen hints toward this in the games I am currently playing through. And honestly, I can't wait to find out for myself. A brightness and cheer that keeps me smiling, mixed with the narrative tension that keeps me invested. This is the formula behind some of my favorite games of all time, and I'm eager to see how the newest addition to my gaming collection tackles it. So, those are the things that drew me towards Dragon Quest. Thanks once again to Karla Vanderberg for creating these excellent new images of my NES avatar that you've been looking at throughout the video. Go give her content some love with the links to her work in the description. But I'm not done talking about Dragon Quest just yet. Join me next time when I talk about Dragon Quests 1 through 3. All in one video? Not sure, I haven't scripted it yet. Might have to split them up if there's too much content for one video, but hopefully it won't take me the better part of a year to publish them this time.